Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Rogue Eye Media. My name is Alex Schlerf, and today, this is the big one. This is my review for the Fantastic Four First Steps. I saw this opening night on Thursday, and today's Friday. I'm recording my review. Basically, right off the cuff, talking about all my thoughts. I'm gonna get right into it, but I'm gonna do a non-spoiler and spoiler section of this episode as usual. So you'll see in the what's it called, the timestamps, it'll be a spoiler and a non-spoiler section. The spoiler section will mostly just be about the third act and the post-credit scene. So it shouldn't be too long, and most of this will be non-spoiler stuff. Of course, people haven't seen the movie yet because I know I'm recording this and posting on Friday, and obviously a lot of people will be seeing it over the weekend and not like I did an opening night. But like I said, starting off the non-spoiler section, this has been my most anticipated movie of the year from the beginning since it was announced, and honestly, probably my most anticipated movie like of my lifetime. Like the only one that would compare would be like some of the old Marvel like Endgame or like No Way Home and stuff like that. But this one is different because I've been a fan of the Fantastic Four my entire life. They were the first comic that I ever read. They have always been my favorite superheroes. I mean, I've read thousands of Fantastic Four comics. I have a whole collection. And I've just always connected and resonated with them so much, and they've always been my favorite superheroes, and I've always loved them so much. In my entire life, I've just yearned for a comic accurate depiction of them on screen because we've had three movies at this point, Fantastic Four in from the 2000s and The Rise of Silver Surfer, and then the Fan Four Stick movie in 2015, and all of them just not only been bad movies in general, but also just been terrible adaptations of these characters that I love so much. And there's been points in my life where I have never known if we're ever going to get a comic accurate portrayal of the Fantastic Four. And then Marvel Studios acquired the rights, and we got this movie going into production, and they announced the casting and the director and all that and the aesthetic and kind of started learning more about it. And I did have a lot of faith that this would be finally a good Fantastic Four movie. Not only good, but like great Fantastic Four movie. But even with that, going into this and watching the trailers and kind of hearing about the movie and watching the cast interviews and all that, all the previews, and like sitting down about to watch the movie and my excitement and anticipation for it, this was still even better than I thought it was going to be. Even though I got exactly what I wanted out of this movie in terms of, my Fantastic Four fan self got everything he wanted out of this movie. But even with that, this was even better than I thought it was going to be. And there were a lot of aspects of it that were more impressive and more just done better than I thought they were going to. And like I said, this is a movie where it means a lot to me, and these characters mean so much to me. Like I said, they're my favorite characters, my favorite superheroes they have in my entire life. The first comic I ever read was Fantastic Four #1 from 1961, and I don't know when I was probably like 5 years old. And so like Mole Man, Giganto, like the Skrulls, like these are the first villains I ever knew in my life. And this movie really works as a tribute to those, golden age. I don't even know what age it is, but those 60s comics from Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. This movie works as a tribute for them. And that's just so beautiful to me because, like I said, I am such a fan of these characters in those original comics. They remind me of my childhood. And I've read them, recently as well and reread them since, but especially the Coming of Galactus arc. Like that is literally one of my favorite comic arcs of all time and one of the first ones I remember reading and seeing them adapt this in this movie. And again, I'll get into this more in kind of more details, but I just want to emphasize the fact that like this movie, regardless of I'm trying to think the best way to put this, but like this movie just means so much to me. And it is a really good movie. It's not only just because I love these characters so much and I love Marvel so much and I love superhero movies. It's not only because of that. The movie is just really good in general. And I think anybody that goes to see it, even if they're not a Marvel fan or not a fan of the Fantastic Four, will go in and start loving these characters and at least really enjoy it. But even with that said, like the movie is really good, but also it just means so much to me. And this is a movie that I am just grateful that I was able to see in a theater. And I could get emotional talking about it. But I'm just grateful that I was able to see this movie in a theater and I'm able to be, alive to witness a good Fantastic Four movie. And I've been waiting, I'm almost 21 years of my life to see a good adaptation of the Fantastic Four on screen. And there were times where I didn't think I'd ever get it. And there were times where it wasn't looking good and we didn't know about casting and people were defending those old movies like and the public perception of Fantastic Four has been so skewed from those old movies And there were just times where I was really low as a Fantastic Four fan, and it felt like they were being erased. And this movie has done so much heavy lifting for the Fantastic Four as an IP and as characters. And I just, again, am so grateful to Matt Shakman and company for making this movie what it is. But anyway, going into more specific positives about this movie, and I'm gonna be honest with you guys, like I don't have a negative to this movie. This movie I gave 5 stars. I think I said in the title, I'm gonna say in the title of this video, but I gave this movie a 5 to 5 star. I think it's one of the best Marvel movies ever released, if not the best. And I've only seen it once, obviously, but I think I'll literally even like it even more the more times I see it. I think I'm gonna see it again on Sunday. But I think that's what this review is going to be. So if you're looking for some, like I'm telling you, this movie to me is perfect. I really did not have any identifiable problems. Like I'm literally thinking about it now, and I don't have an identifiable problem. But the first thing is when you're doing a Fantastic Four movie and you want to make it successful, the number one thing you have to sell is the cast. The four of them, putting aside the villains or whatever, the aesthetic or whatever, you have to nail the cast and the relationships within the cast. And I think that they did exactly that with this movie, and all four of them, Pedro, Vanessa, Joe, and Eben, are all just perfect for the roles, and they each get like a varying degree of things to do, and specifically like Eben and Pedro get a little bit less to do compared to Vanessa and Joe, which is fine. Like there's not going to be room in a movie to kind of give them all detailed character arcs, especially with the way they kind of bypass the origin for this, which I think was a great idea, but. I think, like I said, you have to sell that we care about them as a family. For us to care about what's happening in the third act of this movie, and even the second act as well, you need to actually care about these characters and make them lovable. And the actors, putting in a beautiful acting performance and beautiful portrayal is really important to that. And they all did that. And I think the real standouts for me, and again, I want to emphasize the fact that like they were all great, and I enjoyed all their portrayals, and I'm really excited to see more of them next year in Doomsday, and hopefully in a sequel in the future. But because it's doing well at the box office, so but I think for me, the big standouts were specifically Vanessa as Sue and Joseph Quinn as Johnny Storm, which I guess the Storm siblings. It's funny that I chose the two of them, but I think they were specifically and Vanessa like was clearly the standout, and I think they kind of made her like the lead focus of this movie. And I kind of knew that going in based on a couple of reports that we had heard, but. I definitely get why people said that and lead up to the movie and in the early reviews for this movie earlier this week that she was the lead of this movie because she is like the emotional heart of this movie with her arc with Franklin, with giving birth to Franklin, and with her kind of anchoring the team and anchoring Reed. And I think that she does such a good job of portraying Sue Storm because we have just not gotten a good Sue Storm, but we haven't really got a good adaptation of any of the characters at this point. But Sue Storm specifically has just been used as pretty much a sex object to this point. Like I love Jessica Alba, but it's probably not her fault. But like yikes to that earlier adaptation. And the gap between that adaptation to this one is like literally insane. And I think Sue has already, from this one movie, cemented herself as one of the best female characters in Marvel. And, Marvel Studios specifically doesn't have a storied history with writing female characters good. There's only been a handful, like, Wanda and Yelena would be the ones that are the, two that come to my mind, specifically Yelena recently, obviously. Um, and, we had all those years of Natasha, from the first Iron Man or whatever it was, whatever her first appearance, maybe it was Iron Man 2, to Endgame, where her arc kind of ends, or maybe her solo movie, where her arc kind of ends. We had all that time, and like a character like Natasha, a prominent female character at the time, didn't really get proper character development, and it felt like it was kind of just it's sad to say that Scarlett didn't really get the chance to really give the character, put her own spin on the character and really do some good development for it. But the reason I'm saying this is because it's great that we can get a female character in Sue that has one movie where she is just portraying so many great themes, themes of motherhood and family and I don't want to go into a spoiler too much, but she has a speech, kind of in between the second and third acts of this movie, and it is just Vanessa just crushes it with her acting, and it's so meaningful to the themes of this movie. Maybe I'll talk about it in spoilers, but it's so meaningful to the themes of this movie, and it portrays what the Fantastic Four are about so much and their status in their universe, and I just loved her characterization in this movie, and again. You really needed a good actor to portray all this, and Vanessa's just great. And she was the one when the castings were announced, Vanessa was the one where I was like completely sold instantly. I was like, yes, seeing her in Mission Impossible and a couple other things. Like I mean, she obviously looks the part, but even past that, I was like, oh, that's perfect casting. So Vanessa, I was totally sold on from the beginning, and she did not quell she did not dismiss those positive feelings that I had before the movie. She was just so good. And then Joseph Quinn as Johnny Storm, um, he was one of the ones that I actually none of the castings when they were announced was I like not sold on. But I think in the case of Vanessa and Eben, they announced those and I was like, oh yeah, like that makes sense. Like those two characters, like that makes total sense. And then with Joseph Quinn and Pedro Pascal, it was one of those things where like I know that they are good actors, but I didn't know if they were 100% like the fits that I would think of for their characters. Like they are not the first people that I would have thought of for their characters, and Joseph Quinn was not the first person I would have thought of for Johnny Storm. But with that said, I went into it with the thought that like, he is a great actor, and I do think he's a really good actor and really good up and coming actor that I think he will do a good job with the role. I'm not sure it'll be perfect, but he was perfect. Like his portrayal of Johnny Storm was perfect. And again, I think those old Fantastic Four movies did a poor job of kind of show like of characterizing Johnny because they made him seem like just this sex object who just loves women and nothing else, and he's not really anything more than just this womanizer. I didn't mean sex object. I mean like a womanizer basically. That's what Johnny is in the earlier movies, and I think that this movie still portrays like the fun charm of Johnny and the reason people love him so much. There's shots of people in the crowd saying, I love you, Johnny, and the talk shows saying he's hot, like stuff like that. You still get that stuff, but you also get a very meaningful arc for Johnny in this movie, and it has to do with the surfer, and it really shows his scientific and kind of young side of him and the young energy he has in this movie. And I think that arc, and again, I can't go too much into it because it hasn't really been portrayed too much in the trailers, but I think his kind of arc that he has with the surfer and I think the trailers kind of make it seem like he is just like going to be fiending over the surfer and kind of being just thirsting over her, which that is a part of it. And there's a lot of jokes about that you see in the trailers from Ben kind of saying she dumped you already and stuff like that. Like that stuff is there, but you actually get some like substance from his character and make you actually care about him. And there's this part of him that wants to be that feels left out from the rest of the group. Reed's the smart one, and Sue's kind of the emotional arc with the baby, and Ben's the one that everyone loves. And so yeah, like the four of them are the three of them that's not Johnny kind of have they kind of are always in this kind of conversation. They don't like make fun of Johnny. They don't leave him out purposely, but it kind of just happens. And there's a lot of scenes where like throughout this movie, Johnny has to prove himself, and he does by the end of the movie, and it's in a really good way, and I think it's really well done. And I think the filmmakers did a really good job with his arc. So they were the two standouts out of the four. However, that doesn't mean that Pedro and Eben weren't great too. And I think when it comes to Eben, I think he probably had the least to do out of the four in this movie. Ben's didn't have a huge arc in general. And I think that was fine with me because the kind of grumbling thing arc has already been done, so many times, not only in the comics, but also in the movies as well. I should have split that. Not only in the movies, but also in the comics as well. Like that's been done so many times, and I'm sure they're setting it up to do it kind of in the future. But however, there's still, although he doesn't get a ton of substance with his character, there is still an arc that we see that's not like in front of our face, but it's there. And this is something that the person I saw it with was saying to me on the car ride home last night, that there's a lot of scenes where like he's walking through the street, you can tell he's not fully comfortable with himself, and it isn't straight out there. There isn't a scene where like kids are making fun of him or people are calling him a monster or like stuff like that. It's not right in your face, but it's subtly there, and it's really well done in that sense. And not only that, there's also scenes with him and Tasha Leone's character, where her character is very similar to the character of Alicia Masters in the comics, to the point where like I have no idea why she's not just Alicia. That's kind of weird, but that's not a complaint. It's just kind of weird. It was kind of weird to me. But the character he has a couple scenes with her, and again that's not a lot, and it's not like a huge arc, but I did really appreciate the scenes they had together. And there's a scene towards the end of the third act where I can't really get into it because again it's not really in the trailers, but anyway, their relationship is great, and I do think everything that Evan does with the thing is just a perfect portrayal of him on screen. I thought the CGI looked great. There were no scenes that I saw where anything really felt out of place. I thought the kind of CGI and visuals on him were really good. Even when he was talking to like human characters, like I think it all worked really well. I think it's probably their best, motion capture work to date, at least since the Hulk. in those early Avengers movies. But I think he is funny and his dynamic with Johnny is great. Kind of the lead up to the clobbering time is funny and all that. And we finally get it in the third act, which is great. Him kind of making it his own, I think, is awesome. And yeah, he's just a really lovable, the ever loving thing. That's what he is, just a really lovable character. So again, even though he has the least to do out of the four, he is still great. And then you get Pedro as Reed, and I think for a lot of people, he's going to be kind of like if you're ranking the four and their importance or maybe how much you like them, it's going to be he might be fourth or third or fourth. But Reed Richards has always been one of my favorite comic characters of all time. So I'm a little biased in the sense that like you give me a good Reed Richards and I'm going to just fall in love with the character and talk about them a lot. And they nail his characterization in this movie. Like there are so many really good lines that I won't be able to exactly quote because they're either a spoiler or I just won't remember exactly. But there's so many just amazing lines. There's a fly going around my thing. There's so many amazing lines about Reed and talking about how his brain gets in the way and he has to anchor himself to his family. See this fly? Look at this. This fly is like a Superman fan or something. They're hating on my review. Dude. Um, it's gonna distract me, but whatever. There's a lot of lines where, and the main thing is that, and this is so much. This is literally Reed Richards in the comics, is that he always lets his brain get in the way, and he has to anchor himself to his family and specifically Sue to make the right ethical decision because he is not doing it intentionally, but he is so smart that he does all these variables and he works out the scientific equation of what will make the most sense scientifically. That's not always the best choice, specifically with the choice they have to make in this movie. And again, it's a bit of a spoiler. I'm not going to go into it too much, but with a choice they have to make in this movie and relating to Galactus and the Surfer and what Galactus wants from the Four and from their Earth. And it's been revealed in some promos, but still, I'm not going to go into it. But to do with that, the decision that he wants to make is the scientifically sound decision. And there's a scene where they're at the dinner table and he's kind of saying, like, scientifically, ethically, or I don't know if he says ethically, but scientifically and mathematically, this is the exact thing we should do. But, there's a big family element to it. And Sue is like, well, we're not going to do that. And then right after that, there's a scene with Ben and Reed where Ben kind of says, like, you might be smart. And he calls him Stretch, by the way. Oh my God. I don't know how many people even talked about that, but him calling him Stretch, dude. Oh my God. Awesome. Awesome. But in that same scene, Ben's kind of like, well, you might be smart, but there's so many simple things in life that you don't fully understand. And that's why we're here. And we're here to help you. Like, it's just so that is the Fantastic Four is Reed is the brains, but he needs the other three of them to do anything and to defeat these threats. He cannot defeat them by himself. He just can't. That is the perfect characterization of Reed Richards and his relationship with the three of them. Like, just so, 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 so good, so well written, so well done. And like I said, Pedro does such a great job with Reed in this movie and with his kind of with the scenes and the stretching, by the way. I haven't even talked about their powers yet, besides I guess the thing, but his stretching looked great. There's a lot of stretching. There's not like a ton of stretching in this movie, but there's a lot of stretching in the third act, and it just looked great in the way he was swinging between things. And there were a couple scenes also early on where like he kind of stretches across the lab and so they do cool stuff with it. Like they don't do anything super ridiculous, which is fine. I didn't really need that out of this movie. People who say that aren't really fans of Fantastic Four, clearly. But yeah, they did a really good job with the stretching and just his characterization in general. It's so so strong, and they really Matt Shackman and company and everyone who worked this movie just gets Reed Richards. You can just tell that, and they get all the four of them. Like wrapping this section up, like they understand these characters, and that was the most important thing. You have to sell these characters and make us care about them, and they did that. And with that again, I want to move on to the next positive, but the Reed and Sue dynamic is one of the most important things to a movie like this is you have to get their relationship correct. And in this movie, they're already married. So, a lot of their relationship stuff has come off screen. And this movie kind of opens with us learning that they've been trying. I don't want to, this is like in the first 10 minutes of the movie, but I don't want to say it, but they have a certain problem in their relationship relating to having a baby. And which, by the way, I'm glad they adapted that because it's kind of unknown. It's kind of not really well known in the general public that Sue Storm in the comics has a miscarriage, and it's a very emotional moment for her and for the family. And that's not exactly what happened, I think, in this universe and in the movie, but they kind of a little bit adapted with the fact that they've been struggling to have a baby for a couple of years, and I really appreciated that. But I just wanted to say that as an aside. But you really have to sell that Reed and Sue relationship. And you need two great actors to do it. And Pedro Ernesto did a good job. And it's not like a perfect relationship. It's not, sunshine and rainbows and they're just kissing and loving each other the whole time. But that's not what we need. We need a real relationship, one that actually feels real and rooted in human things with them, being these superpowered heroes. And that's what we got in this movie. And I really, really appreciated the way they adapted that relationship. And I thought it was great. So yeah, the four of them, great. The next positive and kind of talking about is the visuals of this movie, and that's kind of how I'm going to get into the Galactus and the Surfer. By the way, I'm wearing my Silver Surfer shirt. You can't see it today, but I'm wearing it. It's blocked by the mic, but there you go. But it's crazy because although I had seen from the trailers that this movie would be very visually appealing and everything about it looked really good, I was blown away by how good the visuals were in this movie. Like, I genuinely think this is the best looking MCU movie ever. And like, that's bound to happen with like CGI and effects leveling up over the years. And, the longer we get on, obviously the Incredible Hulk didn't have the same, effects work that this movie has because it's been 20 years since then. But the visuals in this movie were so, so amazing. Like, this movie was so good looking. And I think that the standout thing that made me think that was a scene in Act Two, and it's been in the trailers, the scene where the surfer is chasing the four of them. There's a couple shots of it like riding the waves, and there's a shot of them in the black hole. Again, I'm not gonna go too into it because I want you to appreciate this in the big screen for the first time, but I'm telling you, like, that is one of my favorite MCU scenes already. Like, I know that's recently biased, but it's not. Like, it is beautiful looking. It is tense. It is amazing acting by the four of them in the ship. It is takes like beautiful inspiration from like Interstellar. I think at least it's what I kind of the vibes that I got after watching while I was watching the movie. Everything about it is all the dialogue and stuff. There's some humor in there. There's some tension. Like, everything about it. It's like a 20-minute sequence from when they go up to Galactus's world ship and when they're trying to escape. And it is just so, so, so well done and so good. And again, like, I think it's one of the best scenes in the MCU. But that is where the visuals really shine with how space looks and how the surfer looks and how this like black hole looks and how Galactus' world ship looks. All of that just looks great. And that kind of emphasizes kind of the main like positive of the VFX in this movie. But the whole movie looked great. Like, I already mentioned that Ben looked great throughout the movie, the stretching from Reed. I loved how they portrayed Sue's powers and they focused a lot more on like her bending light instead of just turning invisible. Like, she didn't really turn invisible a lot in this movie. There were a lot of shots of her turning other things invisible, which is something that we've never seen in live action before, and not a lot in the comics either, actually. So that was really appreciated too. I thought that was awesome. And there's in that scene I was just talking about, there's a really good moment with that. And then Johnny flaming on. Oh, Johnny didn't even say flame on in this movie, which is interesting. I didn't even think about that. Doesn't really matter, but that was interesting. But Johnny, all the effects with him were great. And then I already said Reed's stretching looked as good as it could be, I think. But just in general, like the VFX, and then that gets into Galactus, and there's no other way to kind of describe how Galactus was done in this movie besides from just astonishing and menacing and for a world, a 14 million or whatever billion-year old cosmic god, they portray that in the perfect way. And he is so menacing and so large. And Ralph Ineson's voice for him, as expected, is perfect and so deep and menacing. And I think I heard in the last 24 hours, I've heard a couple people saying that they wanted more out of Galactus in this movie. And although I do understand that, I don't really agree because it works in the sense that, we only get like two or three scenes of actual, like seeing Galactus and doing his thing. But I think it works because you feel his presence in the scenes where he's not there. The scenes they're trying to work out what to do and how to stop him. You feel the weight of Galactus is felt just from his presence from what you've seen in the earlier scenes, specifically his introduction scene. I think that does work really well to where when he comes to Earth, and it's not a spoiler, like he comes to Earth in the third act, it is so much more tense and meaningful because you felt that danger from the start, from they first introduced him, and from when they're working it out and all that. And you see kind of slowly his world ship coming towards the Earth. Like all of that is done so well, and Galactus was adapted just perfectly. He's so, I mean, I think I said in my letterbox review, like astonishing. Like everything they did with him was so good. And then that gets me to talking about the Silver Surfer. And Julia Garner's adaptation of the Surfer is also just excellent in the way that not only do we get some just cool scenes and her look and design is great, and again, through that scene of her chasing them and stuff, and all the scenes of her flying through either New York or in space are great, and the visuals on it are amazing. Not just that, but Garner's performance and showing the kind of emotion of the surfer, who is for the most part an emotionless character and just sees the death of universes and has to kind of reconcile with that. Um, the emotion that she shows specifically in one of her last scenes with Johnny that is not in the trailers at all, so I'm not going to spoil it. But there's a scene with Johnny in Times Square with Johnny and her, and just amazing acting from Joseph Quinn, but also from Julia Garner, and it kind of we see the emotion of the surfer come out, and we see a quick flashback to her history, and all of that is just great. And again, I love Garner's performance of the surfer, and I think there was a very satisfying conclusion to her in the third act as well, which I'm not going to get into again for spoiler reasons. But yeah, Galactus and the surfer were done well in terms of just their characterization, but also the visuals and all of that. Again, this is such a good looking movie visually, and like I didn't even identify a single bad CGI shot in this movie. Like people will have to go and screenshot stuff on Twitter and probably take pictures blurry out of context, but this movie just looks amazing. And again, that works towards the great performances from Innocent and Julia Garner. And dude, this fly will not leave me alone. My goodness. That works to the great performances of those two actors and to the visuals of this movie and how good looking it is. Dude, this is so annoying. I'm not even gonna cut this out. I'm gonna leave it in. But yeah, so those are kind of, the outstanding positives. And I think the last thing I'm trying to think, I think this is the last thing I'm gonna say is that I kind of talked a little bit about the aesthetic earlier and how this is kind of tribute to Jack Kirby and Stan Lee, which is just so good and so beautiful. And there's a nice little tribute to Jack Kirby at the end, which is great. And with the naming of their universe, 828 is a tribute to Jack Kirby as well. But I think, and this has been said before, and even lead up to this, but I think making this movie set in an alternate universe was the perfect choice because you can really feel the stakes and the tension throughout the entire thing. You can feel for this, and they do a lot of great world building with it because, like, you feel for this universe, and you want this universe to survive, and you want these characters to stop this huge threat. And this is something that they wouldn't have been able to do if they were shackled by NCU continuity. And I know they'll probably get to the main timeline after Secret Wars, and we'll kind of see how it works out there. And I'm sure that'll work fine. And I'm interested to see what a Fantastic Four movie would look like in 616. But I think starting them off in this movie, and kind of starting off with that montage of them fighting some of their villains. There are a lot of cool name drops there. Name drops to obviously Mole Man kind of had a role in this movie, but you had a name drop to Puppet Master, to Mad Thinker, to Diablo. I think there were a couple others in there that I won't really remember, and there's kind of a reference to them in the post credit scene too. But yeah, I think them paying tribute to those original comics, and again, as someone who is a huge fan of those original comics and grew up on those original comics, not because I was born in the 60s, but because I read them when I was a kid. Because that excuse me, that was just a beautiful tribute. And I think, again, making it in the 60s aesthetic is one thing, and then making it an alternate timeline was just a great choice, I think, narratively. And it really helped with them making you feel the stakes instead of just, an average MCU movie where, like, you know, that it's probably going to turn out okay. Where this movie, you don't know what's going to happen. You have no idea how it's going to end and how it's going to tie into the Avengers movie and how it's going to tie into how Thunderbolts ended and stuff. And we got our answers to that. I'll talk about that in spoilers, or not totally, but I'll talk about that in spoilers. So yeah, I really did appreciate the 60s aesthetic and all the comic references that we got. Yeah, Mole Man was great. I guess I didn't really talk about Mole Man. He didn't really have like a huge role in this movie. I thought he'd have a little more scenes. This not a problem, but still, Paul Walter Hauser as Mole Man was great. I kind of wish he had the more comic accurate look. He didn't have the cape. He had the glasses, which is great. But he didn't have like his cape, and he wasn't really like hunched over at all. So I would have liked to see that maybe more in the future. When they maybe they adapt more of the Hickman stuff, we'll see a more comic accurate Mole Man look. But I'd love to see more of him. Like I thought he was great, and he actually does play an integral role in later in the story, which I thought was hilarious. And he has a really funny scene with the four of them, and his relationship with Sue is great. And really shows how kind and great Sue is in this movie. And yeah, great comedic timing from him, and great. So yeah. I really appreciated the aesthetic and kind of comic accurate portrayal and how it's a tribute to specifically, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, but specifically Jack Kirby. And I think I saw a lot of tweets coming out of this movie where it was like, I wish they were both here to see this. And I totally agree with that. And listen, it's a beautiful tribute to them and they are the creators of Fantastic Four, I don't think that their run is like perfect in any way. I think Jonathan Hickman is the prime Fantastic Four writer. But they're right there up with him, obviously, and that's a discussion for another day. But yeah, trying to think if there's anything more that I need to get into without spoilers. In terms of like the emotional, people might be curious like how emotional I got because I made it very clear that like watching the trailers and stuff, I literally cried watching a lot of trailers. So for your information, I cried in the opening montage because I was kind of just overwhelmed. I was like, I can't believe this is happening, and there were a lot of great comic references. And then I also cried. I can't say what it was, but there's a moment with Sue towards the end. Sue and Franklin in the third act. If you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about in spoilers. I cried then as well. And then just in general, like tearing up a little bit, like talking about it and realizing the movie is real over the last 24 hours. But yeah, that was my emotional weight with this. And again, I don't know if I have any other, positives to say without being a spoiler, but I just, again, I'm so grateful that I was able to experience this movie. And I saw it in IMAX. I should have said this. I saw it in IMAX, and it was like an opening night fan event, and I saw it at AMC. Everything was great with that. Great presentation, all that. AMC Styles member for the win. But yeah, I watched in IMAX, and I will say, I know IMAX is expensive, and there's not always. I had to literally drive an hour away to go see this in IMAX. I know it's not always like readily available, but if you do have the means to go see it in IMAX, I would do it. And specifically for the visuals and Galactus and the Surfer and all that, like, but even just everything and all the action scenes, I would go see this in IMAX if you have the means because it is worth it. Even though it's like a $20 ticket, it might be far away. I paid $20 for my ticket and I drove an hour away, but I think it was totally worth it. And it was a great experience. I think anyone that's seen it in IMAX would agree with that. So, yeah, again. I just am so grateful that I was able to experience this movie just, in IMAX, but just in general. And it's just so beautiful seeing like people fall in love with these characters that I have fallen in love with my whole life and have loved my whole life. And that's what this movie needed to do for Marvel was they needed to sell people on this family and sell people on these characters and make people care about these characters when we see them in Doomsday and Secret Wars and any time in the future. And I think they succeeded in that. I know there's a lot of people that have some problems with this movie, and I haven't really seen anyone rate it like lower than a 4 star, which is great. It's had some like just like occasional bad reviews, which just like are people that don't like comic book movies and they're never gonna like this movie. But I think people have been giving it 4 stars, and I'm kind of like, I wish they give it higher, but still, the bottom line is like everyone has been loving these characters and has been sold on these characters, and that just means so much to me. And to be able to see like the fact that like people are seeing these like Mole Man and stuff like that, the fact that we got a live action Mole Man is just crazy to me. I never thought it would happen, and I'm so glad that it did. And again. Matt Shackman's direction and storytelling in this movie is just so good, and I'm so glad he was the choice of this movie. This is his first feature film, which is crazy how good he did with his first feature film. But his work on kind of these really good television shows, and then his work on WandaVision and kind of how that works with the 60s aesthetic, he was a perfect choice for this. And I think Shackman killed it, and everyone involved working in this movie killed it. The actors, the filmmakers, everything like that. And again, such a good time. And I think here's what I'll say. Even if you're not a comic book fan and you typically, you've liked comic book movies before, but you don't really like them and you haven't really liked them as much since Endgame, I think this will be a fan favorite for that general audience member that isn't as big of a comic book fan because this is as much a comic book movie. It's as much as it is that, it's also a movie about family and it's like a sci-fi movie, with the space elements. And I have a couple friends that are big fans of the movie Interstellar, and I was saying like this movie takes a lot of inspirations from that movie, specifically in the second act. So like I would give this movie a chance, if you like sci-fi stuff or you like movies or you like any of the actors in the cast, you like movies that kind of focus on family and character arcs within their family. I'd give this movie a shot because I think you will really enjoy it. because of that family dynamic and because of that sci-fi aspect. So yeah, we're gonna take a quick break and then we get into spoilers because I need to go to the bathroom. But and you're not gonna do something to cut it. But yeah, again, if you haven't seen the movie, I'm going to go into spoilers. And thank you for watching the non-spoiler part. Come back when you've seen the spoilers. Come back when you've seen the movie to see the spoiler section. But again, Fantastic Four First Steps, 5 out of 5 stars for me. Perfect. It was everything that I wanted out of a Fantastic Four movie. And I'm just so glad that I got to see this opening night IMAX. I'm going to see it many more times, and I'll be talking about this movie for years. And I think that it is one of the best movies MCU's put out, and maybe their best. So yeah, quick break, and then we're going to get into spoilers right now. Okay, so I lied. One more last thing that I didn't say in non-spoilers that I wanted to. Um, I think a couple people have been saying about this movie is that they didn't like as much there was less action and they wish there was more action scenes compared to like scenes of them working things out. And I could not disagree more about that. Like part of it is because, you know what, I'll just put it like this. That is the Fantastic Four. Like as someone who has read almost every Fantastic Four issue that exists, like that is the whole thing about them is they are scientists, explorers, blah blah blah. Like they work out issues instead of going in and fighting like somebody like the Avengers or like maybe the Thunderbolts. Like they are not. That's not them. Their whole thing is that they are so connected and smart that they work out problems together and slowly and in their lab and stuff like that with Reed and stuff like that. Like I appreciated that portrayal on screen so much. The fact that they're not jumping right into action is that they're actually spending time working things out and not just doing all out action scenes. And even then, the action scenes in this movie are great. Like the scene I just set up with the surfer chasing them, but also there's a scene toward the end where they're all using their powers and it's great, you know. So I like don't totally get, I kind of like get that complaint, but I don't totally get it, or at least I don't agree with it personally. And if it didn't work for you, I get that. But that is what the Fantastic Four are working out problems themselves and not, you know, fully going into action. So anyway, now I'm gonna get into spoilers. So cut it right here. And if you have not seen the film, stop right now. This is going to be a long section. I'm kind of just going to talk about the post-credit scene and the ending. I guess first I'll start with the ending and then kind of go on to the post-credit scene. So the only thing that I want to talk about the ending is that, well, first off, I'll talk about that speech, that Sue Storm speech. Like her because I was referencing that earlier. Her relating to her relating the kind of audience that she has from the city and calling them her family and showing Franklin and then saying how this is her family. Like that scene is just so well done. It's so well written and just emphasizes the Fantastic Four so well. They did such a good job with it. And I think Vanessa just does a great job acting it out. And the fact that she's giving a hero speech with a baby in her hand. Like I think in the interview with Josh Horowitz a couple days ago, she mentioned that and how it was like a big impactful thing. But yeah, it's just so well done. I just love that scene so much. But then the other thing that Vanessa just did a good job with is obviously the ending scene where she's pushing back Galactus. And dude, this fly is gonna make me lose my mind. What is it doing here? The scene at the end where she's pushing back Galactus, and she she pushes him back and then obviously she dies and Franklin revives her. I said it earlier, I was bawling my eyes at this scene. Like it was so tense and emotional and you know, I didn't think Sue was actually going to die. Like there was no part of me that really thought that. But even then, like with this being an alternate universe and with you meeting these characters the first time, you don't know what's going to happen. And when you're in the moment, you're just like, wow, is she going to die? Like you don't even know. So I think that scene with Franklin like reviving her and like you know laughing, it's the cutest thing ever, and them you know putting their noses together, like it's so cute. And the scene works on an emotional level because you care about the characters, you know, seeing Reed try to bring her back to life and holding her in his arms and crying that he thinks his wife is dead. None of that would work if first off the actors weren't good, but they are, and second off if they didn't do a good job with the characters earlier in the movie to make you care about them. That wouldn't have worked, and it did. It was so good. That whole sequence with Galactus coming to Earth and him kind of you know walking the streets and destroying the buildings, and after they you know evacuate everyone to Subterranea, was so well done. It's interesting because in the Coming of Galactus comic, he doesn't really do that. You know, he kind of just floats over New York and kind of is building his machine because they actually did do a lot of changes with this comic with this movie to the comic. And I don't think it was a bad thing, but for those of you who don't know, like in the comic, they end up defeating with a device called the Ultimate Nullifier, which basically would destroy the world if Reed used it. And you know, Galactus kind of doesn't call it a bluff. He says he doesn't think it's a bluff. He's like, all right, I'll go away. Don't destroy me with this nullifier. So it made sense they didn't do that for this movie because that was kind of like the Watcher sent Johnny across the cosmos and like he came back and there was a lot of different things. Like I get why they didn't do it. And then there's the thing between Alicia and the Surfer. Like I get why they kind of changed it up a little bit. But it was interesting how they did and they did with the bridges and stuff, which I thought was good. It was a good choice. But that was another thing that in the Coming of Galactus arc, there's no really point where he comes to Earth and kind of walks through and destroys things. That doesn't really happen. They don't evacuate them like they do in this movie. So I'm glad they did that in this movie because I think that was great to see that visually and really emphasize how menacing Galactus is. And, if it wasn't already by the fact that he's holding their child in his hand and the kid's crying, like if it wasn't already from that. Um, so yeah, I think all the stuff with Franklin and Galactus wanting Franklin, I think that was great. Adapting Franklin Richards for the first time on screen. Thought they did great with him. And I heard a couple people saying like that they didn't think the CGI on him looked good, but I didn't notice any problems with it. So someone would have to point out an individual shot that they had a problem with. But yeah, everything with that was great. And again, that scene with Sue, pushing him back and dying, everything from her starting to push him back and kind of exerting her powers and dying, and Franklin reviving her, reviving, resurrecting, whatever you want to say. All of that is just so emotional and good, and such an emotional gut punch, and so well done, so well acted from Vanessa, and Pedro as well, and Joseph, all of them. I mean, not Evan, kind of. That's kind of the way the thing is he doesn't really show his emotions like that. But with Joseph and Pedro showing their emotions, for Joseph thinking of losing his sister, and Pedro thinking of losing his wife. Like they're just so good. That scene's so emotional and so great. And then the ending of them all going off, being at the talk show and then going off and into space, and or not in space, wherever they were going. Just a great ending, and so good. So I don't know if I have any other spoiler things to say about the movie itself. I think I kind of made that all clear in the non-spoiler section. However, obviously, the post-credit scene was huge, and we got our first look at Doctor Doom. And I think a lot of people kind of expected a little bit more out of the post-credit scene, just because it is, well, I guess Brand New Day is coming out, but it's kind of the one of the only chances they'll have to tease Doom before Doomsday. And it was very clear that he was going to be in this movie in some capacity. And what I want to talk about this is, well, first off, I want to say. I like the post-credit scene. I think it does the job it needs to do. It establishes Doom. We see, although we don't see his full look, we see him for the first time, and we see how the Fantastic Four are going to be connected into Doomsday because Doom is potentially taking their child. Like that we see all that. But my curiosity is that there's been a bit of back and forth with the Scoopers, the reliable Scoopers, with Doctor Doom's origins and where he will be from. And again, I'm talking specifically RDJ as Doctor Doom. And I know there was a rumor early on when First Steps was filming that he would be from the Fantastic Four's universe, but then I think a couple people walked it back and said he wouldn't be from the Fantastic Four's universe. But then in this movie, we have two references to Latveria. And, I don't know, maybe some people didn't catch this, but it wasn't like meant to be like a secret reference to background. Like they literally pan to they're at the United, I think it's the United Nations or it's Future Foundation, whatever. But they are at the Future Foundation conference and they're at like United States, blah blah blah, and they go onto Latveria with an empty seat for like 3 seconds. Like, and then there's another shot later on where they pan and you see the Latverian flag and no one's there again. So it's like, and for those who don't know, Latveria is the home country of Doctor Doom. So I think that was a clear intentional reference. And with that said, and with that knowledge, I have a feeling that, dude, this fly is crazy. With that said, I feel like he has to be from the Fantastic Four's universe. And there's a lot of questions to be answered with that. And dude, I cannot do it with this fly. There are a lot of questions to be answered with that. And my main question is like, if the Fantastic Four and Doctor Doom have been operating in the same universe for 4 years, and there was even a time jump for that, so even more than that. If they've been operating for that long, why? I just find it hard to believe that Doom wouldn't have stepped in and fought them like at least one time. Like, maybe he did, but I don't know why if they're doing that opening montage with them fighting Mole Man and them fighting Puppet Master and Mad Thinker. Like, if they're gonna do all those villains, it feels weird they wouldn't shout out like when they fought Doctor Doom or defeated Doctor Doom. So that makes me think that if he is from the First Steps universe, that he is a little bit more like diplomatic at this point, and he isn't really like, dude, get off my computer, bro. Um, it makes me think that he is a little bit more diplomatic in this universe and maybe isn't more of like a mass. He isn't really fully into action yet and doesn't really feel the need to take action against the Fantastic Four. And that rivalry has not been established yet. However, I do think that establishing that rivalry through them or Doom taking their kid, and especially after what they went through in this movie and how much they had to defend Franklin from Galactus, and now having to do it all over again with Doom, I think that is a great way to set the stage for the rivalry between the Fantastic Four and Doom ahead of Secret Wars, because obviously the comic they're adapting from, Time Runs Out to Secret Wars, those comics that they're adapting, it is literally a story of Fantastic Four versus Doom, and Secret Wars is literally Reed versus Doom. Like that is basically the main plot line of the thing, is the decades long rivalry of Reed Richards and Victor Von Doom. So I think they obviously don't have enough time to set that up because they just introduced the Fantastic Four the first time a year before Doomsday comes out, but or over a year before Doomsday comes out, and over 2 years before Secret Wars comes out. But I think although they don't have a time to fully adapt, I think doing it in a way where they have it where he takes Franklin, as kind of that's how they do that rivalry, and that's how they set it up for not only these next two movies, but probably in the future as well when there's a new actor for Doctor Doom. I think that's really good. I think it's a good choice. I think it makes a lot of sense. And I think that him, you know, that is going to be kind of probably our opening to Doomsdays. And it's interesting because in the scene, I think people were saying, I don't remember, I have to rewatch it again. But I think people were saying they heard Doctor Doom teleport in the scene, which would make sense, obviously, because Sue was reading to Franklin and then all of a sudden Doom's there. But there wasn't anything of him teleporting out, I don't think. Again, I have to rewatch it, but I don't think we saw him teleporting out with Franklin. So I'm curious on if like that scene was shot on the set of Avengers Doomsday. So like that is directed by the Russo brothers. So it's a direct Doomsday connection. And I'm curious if that um we will pick up from that scene in Doomsday, like directly from that scene, or Doom will just teleport and then the Fantastic Four will have to kind of track his energy and see if they can find him. And ask another question like, do the Fantastic Four even know who Doom is at this point? Maybe they know Latveria, and maybe there's been another person, but maybe there's been another person ruling Latveria. Maybe they have no idea who Victor Von Doom is or what he's capable of. I don't know, and I'm not saying I'm not saying I'm worried about that. I just don't know the answer to that question. We will find out, unfortunately, probably not till December 2026, but that's the beauty of these movies. You have to wait forever for them, but and then makes them you get to appreciate the experience when you get them. But yeah, I think that the scene leaves me with a lot of questions, but that's what it's meant to do. And like I said, it could have been a lot better. It could have been a lot like more spectacular, and we could have seen the whole look of Doom, or we could have seen RDJ delivering a line and all that because they did film on the set of Doomsday, so I'm assuming it was RDJ in the suit. But they could have done all that, but you know, it does what it needs to do. It sets up Doom, it sets up the relationship with the Fantastic Four, it gets you intrigued for Doomsday and what his motivations are and stuff. And again, I am very curious if we will see Doctor Doom that scene extended in Doomsday, because we'd heard that the Thunderbolts post-credit scene might be a Doomsday scene, like a scene that we'll literally see again in Doomsday. We've heard about that. And I think it might be the same here, so we'll have to see about that. So yeah, funny enough, we didn't really get our answer to the Thunderbolts post-credit scene, which to me is hilarious because so many people were saying that the ending of Thunderbolts spoils Fantastic Four, which is just never the case. But people were saying, and I think I talked about this in my Thunderbolts review, or maybe it was in my maybe did I talk about it? I think it was my Thunderbolts review. It feels like so long ago. But yeah, like there was this dumb Twitter dialogue where it was like, well, I'm not gonna watch Fantastic Four now because I know that their universe gets destroyed. Well, ha, yeah, did Galactus destroy their universe? I've been saying this for months, if not years, that their universe will not be destroyed. It wouldn't make any sense for this movie or anything. And like I said, this movie ends with them still in their universe in Earth 828. And I think, although I did think that the universe wouldn't get destroyed, I did think that we wouldn't get that many scenes in their universe after this movie. And I thought kind of Doomsday would kick off with them leaving their universe and we wouldn't really see the First Steps universe at all. However, with the way this movie ends and with the fact that in some of the interviews for this movie, I think Evan Moss Backrack might have been the one who slipped out and talked about the fact that they've shot scenes in the First Steps universe, so on the same set as First Steps, and they also said that they've had actors from the Doomsday cast that are not, the main four, people like what just the non-Fantastic Four cast members of Doomsday, they've said that they have shot scenes on the First Step set. So that means that not only is the First Steps, universe going to be seen at the beginning of Doomsday, it's probably going to be have a lot. We're going to have a lot of scenes in Doomsday with that. So again, this is like a larger discussion for another day. Maybe I'll do a video at some point, like breaking down my theories and stuff like that. The more I have to think about it, but it is really interesting. And again, that's awesome that we might get more of this First Steps universe because we know that by the time we get to post Secret Wars, it's assumed that there will be a reboot and the Fantastic Four will be in the mainline 616 and not in their own universe. So that'll be really interesting to see if we get more scenes of their universe in Doomsday. And I think we will. And again, it was cool to see Doom. I don't really have any thoughts on Doom's look. I think the capes look good. The mask, I just couldn't really see. I don't have any opinion on the mask. The cape looked good. And I'm sure it's going to be a very comic accurate look. It is interesting that he took his mask off. And I wonder if we'll see Doom's face very early on in this movie because if like Sue sees that Doctor Doom looks like Tony Stark, that will mean nothing to her. So like he can probably reveal his face to her pretty early on because that she doesn't know who Tony Stark is. So that will really matter. But yeah, so we could have got a full look, but still, I understand they're saving it for, a trailer. Probably Super Bowl next year, we'll get a trailer for it. Or maybe like at the end of production. I think Doomsday will wrap production in a couple months. Maybe not that. Maybe like November, so maybe 3 or 4 months. But anyway, um, no real looks on his design because, like, again, the cape looked good. We didn't really get to see the mask, so I don't really have any thoughts on that yet. Obviously, I don't want to jump to conclusions or anything. But yeah, it is interesting. It does set up a lot of questions, and I'm excited to see the dialogue about it in the next couple of months and kind of see if we get a breakdown from Feige or Shackman or anything, or the Russos. Obviously, it wouldn't be Shackman because Shackman didn't direct it, but. I did think that was so interesting that they referenced Latveria multiple times in the movie, and that they did not do that for no reason. Like they did that for a reason, and I think the reason is that Doctor Doom is from the Fantastic Four First Steps universe. So that'll be really interesting to see if that is true and if we get that confirmed at some point. So yeah, good post credit scenes. That's up a lot. The second one was more like a joke post credit scene, but I did really appreciate it because it was cool because we had the references to Diablo and Puppet Master and stuff, but then we actually got to see like an animated version of them on the TV. So that was cool. I mean, I know like people were rolling their eyes and being like, "Oh, I had to wait through the whole credits for this," but I thought it was cool. I needed to go to the bathroom a lot, so that's kind of annoying. I have to wait for it, but I liked it. I thought it was sweet. That's how Marvel does usually these days. One serious, one joke. So cool. Yeah. I don't think that's all I have for spoilers in that post-credit scene. Again, I'll probably talk about it a lot more in the future, and I hope that if you have not seen First Steps, you're not watching this part right now because I did not get that spoiled in the lead up to the movie, and I'm glad that I didn't because seeing Doctor Doom show up, I could kind of tell once like she walked away and we got the kind of slow zoom and in the credits, actually, after we learned that the tiny little theme that is in that was an Alan Silvestri theme, who does the music for the Avengers movies, and is probably going to do the same, or is definitely going to do the same for the upcoming Doomsday and Secret Wars films. And it was like a Doom question mark was the name of the theme. But anyway, um, once they kind of started going back towards him, I was like, yeah, we're getting Doom. Like that's what this is going to be, and especially with the references to Latveria in the movie as well. I thought we might get him in the movie at some point. When I saw Latveria, I was like, oh wow, because I didn't expect it at all. And I didn't. That wasn't. Maybe it was leaked in like a plot leak or anything, but I didn't read any of those, so like I didn't even know that. So that was cool. But yeah. I could kind of tell that Doom was coming in, so that was cool. And again, I think they did what they needed to do to set up for Doomsday, and we will see if we get more details about Doomsday in the future and with more cast members or seeing new looks at the film or set leaks. Set leaks have been pretty minimal, which is good. They were filming at that like royal castle and something, and we didn't get any. I mean, at least at this point, we have not gotten any leaks from it. I think they're done filming there, so that's cool. I always like going into a movie with minimal leaks as much as possible. I like kind of watching the promotion for the movie instead of seeing it leaked by like Atlanta filming or whatever. So that's a whole different story. But I do think soon they're going to be bringing in like cast members that haven't been announced to film. So I'm curious if they do another announcement or if we like learn that somebody's in the movie from set leaks. Like I think that's kind of a dangerous proposition. So I hope that's not the case. But anyway, I'm getting on a tangent. I don't really have any other spoiler thoughts or first steps. Just wanted to talk about the post-credit scene a little bit and those Latveria references and the ending of the movie. So yeah, thank you so much for watching this episode. I just love this movie so much. Again, please go out and see it as soon as you can and on the biggest screen possible, preferably. And yeah, I think that I don't know, next time you'll hear from me, I'll probably be doing reviews, videos, something, talk about the post-credit scene maybe. I don't know. But yeah, I've gone super long in this episode. So if you made it this far, thank you so much. And again, this was my most anticipated movie of the year. I still have it below Sinners on my movie ranking because Sinners is just like so like just on another level of storytelling. I can't even compare it to anything else. But in terms of like my ranking from 2025 movies and also MCU ranking. Again, 2025 movies, it's only below Sinners. It's number two in my 2025 ranking right now because those are the only two movies I've given 5 stars. And then for my MCU ranking, right now, the only other MCU movies I've given 5 stars are Infinity War and Endgame. So I have it below those two right now, just because like how do you compare those movies to this movie? But still, like I think at the end of the day, this is going to be my favorite MCU movie because of the connection I have to these characters. So yeah, that's where it would sit in my MCU ranking. Maybe I'll tweet out my MCU ranking, or maybe I'll do a video about it. I don't know, my MCU movie ranking, I mean. But in terms of like I did that post Endgame, that's when I talked about the Thunderbolts thing. But I did that post Endgame ranking video not too long ago, back when I was still at school. So I guess that was in May. And this would be at the top of that ranking. You know, this would catapult over No Way Home and Thunderbolts, and all those movies are great, but still, and good for the MCU that we've gotten two back-to-back very good films and films that have been really well received by both critics and general audience with Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four. And the fact that they're both leading right into Doomsday is going to do really well for Doomsday's box office, I think, and Doomsday's success and the hype for Doomsday. So yeah, that's where it would be. It's up there for my favorite MCU stuff and favorite movies in general from this year. And yeah, I mean, we'll just have to see where it ends up at the end of things, but it'll probably end up being my favorite. So again, thank you so much for watching. I will have much more First Steps content on my Twitter, Rogue Eye Media in general. And yeah, I will see you soon with more content. And yeah, it's clobbering time.